Time now for the Clash. According to the latest figures from NHS England, 44% of beds occupied by COVID patients in England are actually being treated for something else. In London, the number of so-called incidental admissions was even higher, with 51.2% of COVID patients having been admitted for an entirely different reason before they tested positive, probably with Omicron, a little virus, which I've had. Don't be scared of it, honestly. These figures come as the number of patients in hospital with COVID in Britain has now declined anyway to 19,450 after peaking on January the 10th at 19,918, while weekly case numbers around the UK have also dropped by 41%, with one government advisor saying Britain might have a flu-type relationship with the virus by the end of the year. Even the World Health Organization's special envoy for COVID, Dr. David Nabarro, has said that the end of the pandemic is in sight for the UK. And with Boris considering axing Plan B next week, is it time to finally lift all COVID restrictions? And I mean all, masks as well, once and for all. Send me your thoughts on this. I want to hear from you, Dan, at gbnews.uk, at GBNews on Twitter too. And we've got our Twitter poll running there right now. I'll bring you the results very shortly. But to help you make your mind up, let me bring in my two guests tonight. The Conservative MP for North West Leicestershire, Andrew Bridgen. Andrew, I'm going to ask you about some of the political developments tonight in just a moment too. And legendary BBC broadcaster, Dame Esther Rantzen. Andrew Bridgen, look, we'll talk about Boris soon, but let's put him to one side. Regardless of the political crisis that we're in, all the data shows there's no need for Plan B. There's no need for mask mandates. They've all got to go now, surely.
Well, I was one of 101 Conservative MPs who voted against Plan B. It was unnecessary. What we've seen is that even of the home nations, the devolved nations, where they put more strict COVID restrictions on than England did, they ended up with higher or comparable infection rates. Yes, we need to get rid of all the Plan B restrictions, including the masks. The masks are basically ineffective the way most people wear them. The surgical type disposable masks that most of us wear, they're actually to stop blood and body fluids getting near the mouth of medical workers. They're not for preventing viruses being transmitted. It is just part of a pandemic of fear that has been pumped out for far too long. I was a big supporter of the nudge department in number 10, but I'm afraid during the pandemic, the nudge department became the shove department, and people, I don't like my constituents being shoved around, and it's time to drop the lot of it. And if we hadn't implemented Plan B, we wouldn't have spent £6 billion on lateral flow tests. That's 4 times more than Germany spent, twice as much as France. And what effect has actually had on the spread of the Omicron variant? Very, very little. It's very mild, as we suspected from South Africa. We should see what they've been doing and the way they've recovered from it. If we get out of it now, and Boris will announce this tomorrow that we're dropping Plan B, we're going to have first mover advantage. We're going to get our economy going, and we desperately need that so we can cut taxes.
Yeah, and I looked at the numbers that you'd crunched involving the tests, Andrew. I mean, it's just extraordinary. £40 million a day, you say we're spending at the moment. That's £1 billion a month. Insanity. Esther Rantzen, why is Andrew Bridgen wrong?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is to the relatives and friends and colleagues of more than 150,000 people who died of COVID, I want you to recognize that we take those deaths very seriously. We care about your loss, and we want to protect people from suffering the tragedy you've been through. Yesterday, there was a spike in deaths. 438 people died yesterday, according to the figures. And even if you look at the statisticians' calculations to see how many of those actually died from COVID, 4 out of 5 of those deaths were from COVID. That is 350 people plus. That's an awful lot of people every week still dying. Now, I am vulnerable. I'm 81 years old. People in my age group are vulnerable. Mm-hmm. I live with a daughter with underlying health conditions. She's vulnerable. So that I think what we have to do is calculate whether the lives we've lost are valuable, are precious, and whether we care about them. And can I just say, Dan, calling masks muzzles implies that the people wearing masks are attack dogs. And sometimes when I listen to you and your panel, I can see why that might be appropriate.
Well, Esther, I'm sorry. I feel like when I'm wearing a mask, I am muzzled. And these are designed to spread fear. But look, actually, Esther, you were talking to me at the start of your answer because my Aunt Celia is one of those victims of COVID and she died during the pandemic. She had serious dementia. She had been unwell for a very, very long time. She was one of those people I was talking about last night who had underlying health conditions, Esther. And when you look at those numbers, you must accept that it's stark. The vast majority of the people who have died were very ill anyway. Now, that isn't to say the over 17,000 who have died with no underlying conditions are not a great tragedy. But do you not understand that the 150,000 figure is quite misleading?
Well, it's quite high, isn't it? I mean, if you compare it with other nations, we don't look very good in the world record of deaths. And I'm afraid it's because I think we took this serious illness far less than seriously at the beginning of the lockdown. We thought we could get away with things like the Cheltenham race meeting, football matches, pop concerts. And for me, I would have preferred the lockdown to happen earlier because...
And I know, Esther, but I don't know if you're looking at these new statistics from the ONS, which I reported on the show last night. They were only revealed on Sunday. I think, Esther, they'll probably surprise and shock you. Do you know that the number of deaths purely from COVID with no other underlying causes throughout all of 2020 was 9,400 folk, just 9,400. In 2021, we only have the figures, by the way, up until the end of Q3, so it's about 3/4 of the year, just 7,971 deaths of folk with no underlying causes. Now, they are ONS data.
Absolutely. And my daughter has an underlying health condition. She has ME. Any infection she gets is very serious. So, and my closest friend has very high blood pressure. So she has an underlying health issue and indeed has had pneumonia 3 times. So what would you say? That they've brought it on themselves if they die of COVID, or they don't matter if they die of COVID?
Of course not. Of course not. But Esther, what I'm saying to you is, how long does this go on for? How long do we keep restrictions on our lives? I mean, genuinely, that's not a facetious question, because I don't believe that we can keep going on living like this, living with restrictions. I think we have to start trusting the individual.
I think we have to start trusting the scientists, because thank God they have invented the most brilliant vaccines, which are the best single defense against COVID. And
so why don't we open up then?
Well, let's hope that the numbers will fall quickly enough. They haven't yet, but let's hope they do fall quickly enough for those scientists that you appear, Mr. Bridgen, to despise. And can I commiserate with you? I don't know if you watched yourself on Newsnight last night, did you?
No, of course not, because I'm broadcasting live to the nation, and I wouldn't watch that ridiculous lefty show. What happened on Newsnight, Esther?
Well, unfortunately, Mr. Bridgen was being interviewed on College Green, and a rather unpleasing gentleman was waving posters around behind his back, which is very discourteous and I think, appalling. Did you watch yourself, Andrew? Because it won't have pleased you. But anyway, the point you're making is a very good one.
The point you're making, Esther. He's the village idiot who hangs around Westminster. The Policing and Crime Bill he's protesting against enshrines his right to protest, and I will support his right to protest. I don't like the way he does it, and I think he's a very annoying individual, but I would die for his right to be able to protest, and I'm sure he'd let me as well, wouldn't he?
Andrew,
I thought he was going to whack you over the head with one of the posters. But I do
Andrew, I just want Andrew to be able to respond to one of the points that you made, Esther, because Esther talks about our great scientists. And I don't disagree with her, Andrew, on the whole. I mean, absolutely, our great scientists developed the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which absolutely should be one of the tools to bring this pandemic to an end. But I'm sorry, Andrew, we've also had some shockingly bad science over the course of this pandemic. And I would point you to Neil Ferguson, whose projections have been wrong time and again. So I don't just think we can say anymore, 23 months in, that we just listen to all scientists, because we can now look at the science and judge for ourselves who got it wrong. And we should stop listening to those people.
Also, I think we need to listen to and look at the science coming out of other countries. We had advance notice of what was going to happen with Omicron. It developed in South Africa. We saw the pandemic, the variant spread over there very rapidly. We knew it was going to be far more transmissible. All the data coming out of South Africa was it was going to be much milder, far less pathogenic. We implemented Plan B, which has damaged our economy again, upset the health service. And everything that came out of South Africa has actually been repeated.
Yet we had
here.
Sir Chris Whitty saying everything we know about Omicron is bad. I mean, that was a lie. That was a lie.
Not true at all. And nobody's publicising what's also come out of South Africa is that the facts are that the having had the original strain of COVID-19, the Alpha strain, the Beta strain, the Delta strain. None of those protected you from the Omicron strain. But the fact is that all the data out of South Africa shows that if you've had Omicron, which is highly transmissible, a lot of people have had it, very, very mild. Most people, just like a bad cold, you're going to have protection against all the previous variants. And highly likely you'll have protection against future variants as well. That's actually really good news.
Andrew, I just want to interrupt quickly, though, because there's breaking news tonight. Christopher Hope, obviously the very well-connected associate editor of the Daily Telegraph, reporting that as many as 20 MPs from the 2019 intake are planning to submit letters of no confidence in Boris Johnson tomorrow. Now, of course, Andrew, you are one of the MPs who has already submitted a letter of no confidence. Do you believe this report from Christopher Hope to be correct?
Yes, because I was with him when they told him.
Really? So it's happening? 20
It's going to happen.
MPs.
I think that will push over the 54 required to trigger a confidence motion vote. I think Mr. Brady will be, depending on what time they go in tomorrow, Mr. Brady will go in to see the Prime Minister probably in the afternoon. Two things will come from that. I think we're going to be having the confidence vote probably on Tuesday or Monday next week. It'll have to be a three-line whip sitting day. Couldn't really be Thursday. That's already a one-line whip, so a lot of people will be planning not to be here. What else will happen from that is that, knowing the arch strategist and Machiavellian plotter that Mr. Cummings is, he will dump every bit of ammunition he's got in his locker out as soon as that confidence vote's triggered, so that it's all out there for the weekend and people can judge what he will be releasing.
Do you think you might be going too early, Andrew Bridgen, just speaking purely politically?
There's never a wrong time to do the right thing, Dan. And what we do know is that this constant drip out of information damaging to the Prime Minister. It's preventing the Prime Minister doing his job. It's actually paralysing the government. And that's just not tenable. So we need to resolve this matter, I believe, in the country's interest as soon as possible.
OK, and just to press you, Andrew Bridgen, do you know how many of the 2019 intake are planning to submit letters tomorrow?
I heard it will be a 20 who haven't submitted letters so far. 20.
And you believe that there's already 34 letters submitted in that case?
I think it'd be very, very close to that number, yes.
Wow. OK, we're going to have a big political day coming tomorrow then. Andrew Bridgen, Conservative MP for North West Leicestershire, thank you so much. And thank you too to the legendary BBC journalist and broadcaster Dame Esther Rantzen. But who do you agree with? Well, Ephion on Twitter says they say they want people to live with the virus but keep restrictions, making sure that can't happen. Which is it? I think about that all the time. Robert on email says COVID restrictions have terrorised far too many people, and it will take years before those individuals have the confidence to stand near a stranger or go out mask-free. The only way out of this is for retailers to ban people wearing masks. I love that way of thinking. Please God, I would happily go into a shop that banned masks. Keith on Twitter says, I think most people have already had enough after Downing Street parties. I now see less people wearing masks and following rules. And your verdict now in, wow, it is overwhelming. You good people, 92% of you agree that it is time to lift all COVID restrictions, including masks. Just 8% of you want to stay muzzled, like Dame Esther.